So it's the three of us, Bärbel and Zsuzsanna, are also here, and they will also present part of this. So this project aimed at really finding strategies to mitigate foreign language speaking anxiety in our context in distance and online learning. And this is part of a larger research interest we've had for some time. And basically, we are still in the process of gathering data because the focus group sessions didn't finish yet completely. So we will present you the beginnings or the first results we had. Foreign language anxiety is a very specific type of anxiety, and most language students face it. Why is it important? Because anybody, most of our students face it, and from partially informal talks with SST, we found out that after personal circumstances, this is the most important reason behind deferring or abandoning our language courses. Generally, research finds that speaking is the most anxiety-provoking activity, although there are contradictory results as well, but it is a very anxiety-provoking activity in foreign language learning. And most studies report negative effects on language learners, and interestingly, it does not really correlate with language competence. Okay, so even language teachers or non-native teachers often experience it. We knew that there are some specific points in provisions, like residential schools, for instance, which trigger a lot of anxiety for our students. So we actually organized last year an event which was called Fear the Fear and Do It Anyway. And it was so popular that we actually had to arrange a second session. And the responses from there informed our survey design. So we got 307 responses, which is, I think, quite good for generally when we survey our students. And the qualitative data will come from the focus groups, but now we will focus a bit on the quantitative data. And what is interesting for us, we tried to link the anxiety to different groups of students. We are very much interested in students who declare some kind of mental health issue, so that we can help them really to overcome foreign language anxiety. And first, I will show what was the principal worry for students in our cohort, okay, so or in our surveys. So as you can see, we made like basically 5 categories: students who didn't declare anything that would impact on their studies, and we grouped students into the mental health block who declared anxiety, depression, or they said they have other mental health issues. Then we had some students with mobility issues, developmental issues like dyslexia, dyspraxia, and in other, we put those students who did not fit into any of these groups, but declared, for example, that, oh, I have young children, which impacts on my studies. But as you can see, basically, these 2 groups, the mental health issue and the students who didn't declare anything, are the ones that can really be compared due to numbers. And here are the first results. And this was quite a surprising result for us. So when we asked, what is the principal worry for you? About 10% said they didn't worry. They didn't experience foreign language speaking anxiety, but it was about the same with students with mental health issues. So we didn't find any significant difference here. Then a leading cause on our last year events was for anxiety was that students said, well, I cannot remember the vocabulary, although I know it. And as you can see, this is quite a big worry. But again, we don't see any difference between students who do declare a kind of mental health issue and those who don't. And interestingly, we thought that this can be a leading issue for us because our student cohorts are a bit older, but we looked at it, broke it down into age groups, and it's not. So age doesn't seem to be an influencing factor. if we look at statements like I'm worried that I make grammatical mistakes as the leading worry, then we can see that actually students who don't have any mental health issues or any other issues, don't declare anything, fear this twice as much as those students who declare a mental health issue. And it is very similar for the worry, the leading worry that I cannot express complex ideas. This so far seems quite surprising that actually either students with mental health issues don't worry uh, more or even they worry less than students who don't declare anything. But we can see that these statements are those who refer somehow to the language knowledge itself. However, statements which refer more to the self and the self-image or can be a threat to the self-image, like I freeze and cannot speak, actually, students with mental health issues fear this twice as much as students who have no declared issue. And if we look at statements like the other students will judge me or think I'm stupid, then actually we can see that it's 5 times as big a worry for students with mental health issues. So these are points probably where maybe we can intervene somehow and help these students to progress and have good passes. And now I will give the word to my colleague Bärbel.
Thank you so much, Zsuzsanna. I hope you can all hear me okay. Yes, continuing on with those two groups of students that Zsuzsanna has already introduced, the students who had declared an additional requirement and students who had not, we now wanted to find out a bit more about how they would react when we add information about their speaking practice into the equation. And that was very interesting because we found some similarities and some differences, as you can see on this slide. So both groups felt stressed about making mistakes, about speaking spontaneously, and both groups felt the impact of the pandemic and commented that this had reduced their opportunities to speak with other language students or with native speakers. Students without additional requirements also mentioned effects of poor memory on their speaking practice, the conversation not feeling natural, difficulty to decipher the phonetic alphabet, and the speed of conversations. And this is maybe in line again with what Zsuzsanna already said about sort of having maybe more external things they worry about, whereas students with additional requirements were very much worried about the fear of having to speak in front of others and feeling uncomfortable when hearing themselves speaking aloud. So that's quite interesting already. We then looked at which strategies they employ. So both groups sort of use private tutors or native speakers to overcome their speaking anxiety, but also they use digital media for speaking practice. They practice with other students. They use tutorials, speaking in known environments, using module materials, and also try to get themselves into the mindset of language immersion, which of course is much harder, especially during the pandemic. But if we move along to the next slide, thank you. We had different themes really emerging for our students with mental health issues. And the first one of them was loneliness. So a lot of students perceive speaking practice as something that they do on their own. So I'm going to give you a few quotes here just to illustrate that. I don't like hearing my voice. I am generally alone. I generally don't like being watched and judged. The dog is the only one who hears it. I go into a room by myself with the door closed and read through everything at a whisper. And then I speak louder when I have to record. So there is obviously an exacerbation of this by the pandemic and maybe at times by the additional requirements as well. But some students still connect to native speakers, friends or other students to overcome this particular loneliness. But what we felt was that students with mental health rarely mention the value of tutorials. And the other sort of emerging theme was anxiety and fear, fear of being judged, fear of having to speak spontaneously, and fear of making mistakes. Also fear of not remembering words, as Zsuzsanna has said, and interestingly, fear of the tutor. So one student commented that she gets scared occasionally because she's afraid the tutor will find her recordings on the module website and listen to them. So it's very interesting really to sort of hear what the issues are there. And in our next slide, we'll show you how we sort of then added in age and speaking practice. So we've got a good distribution here of participants from different age groups. And in our next slide, we'll see sort of the emerging themes when it comes to age. And I'll just wait for Zsuzsanna to... Thank you. That's great. So there were 4 emerging themes here. The first one is that older people use less digital media or social media for speaking practice than our younger students. So over 70-year-olds tend to do their speaking practice more on their own with a pet. They employ maybe the help of a private tutor, but they don't go to flashcards, apps, podcasts, TV, films, videos, CDs, anything you might mention there, whereas our younger students do, and they do see the value in that. The second interesting topic was that there's a perception of the need to talk to native speakers only for speaking practice. So other students and their value for speaking practice is not really noticed all that much. There's this perceived lack of speaking opportunities. Again, we can surmise that this has something to do with COVID, but it may have much wider aspects here as well, something to investigate further. Hopefully we'll find out more in the remaining data. And a substantial number of students do not engage in speaking practice at all. So a lot of them just admitted, quite frankly, that they don't do any of the speaking activities that we have carefully modelled into their materials and just skip them. And Susan,
2 minutes remaining.
And Susan is going to tell us a bit of the mitigating strategies at this point. Thank you.
Yes, hello, I will. Okay, so we've tried to group the mitigating strategies into 3 groups. The first one skill-orientated, the second one general, and the third one self-talk strategies. And on the next slide, you will see what we mean by that. So skill-orientated strategies, so to speak the target language in different contexts. By reading poetry, talk to the cat, role play, shadow, read a script, sing a song, etc. Or to use other media like YouTube videos, music, film to get used or to hear the language. The second group we call general strategies is, for example, translanguaging. So if they are stuck with a word in the foreign language, they'll be switching back to English, which is very popular at present. Have a list of vocabulary nearby that might be useful. To mute their mic, but still participate aloud without anyone hearing it, or use the away button in tutorials to indicate they don't want to speak aloud. And important, we heard, was take part in icebreakers to get the first words out in the target language. And the third group, the self-talk strategies, is really change how you view mistakes when you are speaking. That is quite an important area because people don't seem to want to speak because they make mistakes. Second is to stop worrying about what other people think about our speaking. Third one, to self-evaluate and remind yourself why you are studying this language. Yeah, what do you want to get out of the language? And the last one, use memory strategies to unfreeze. And the next slide should be my last, which is questions you can send by email to either of us. And we also had references on the very last slide, which means we've managed in 15 minutes.